Okay, my phone says that it's 5:35, so I think we'll start. And like to wish you all a good evening and thank you for attending this Neighborhood Resources information session on becoming a 501c3. I'm Rebecca Roop and I staff Neighborhood Resources along with Kyle Kearns, who's managing the Zoom call tonight and is
Hello,
waving up
everyone.
there. So learning about obtaining 501(c)(3) status is something many neighborhood leaders have expressed an interest in. We're really delighted, therefore, when we learned about two very knowledgeable women, Paula Van Ness and Valerie Pilara, who kindly agreed to provide guidance on becoming a nonprofit. Both have impressive resumes, but given that we only have 1 hour, I'm just going to provide a few highlights. So I'll begin with Paula Van Ness. Paula, can you wave up there? Paula currently serves as the director of the Center for Healthy Nonprofits at the Community Foundation of Southern Arizona. Paula is a seasoned nonprofit executive with more than 45 years in CEO and executive director positions, both locally and nationally, including the National Alliance to End Homelessness in Washington, D.C., Make-A-Wish in Phoenix, and the Connecticut Community Foundation, to name just a few. She also has extensive board experience and currently serves on the Pima Community College Foundation Board. Paula has a master's degree in organizational development. Valerie Pilara, Valerie, can you wave? Valerie currently serves as the executive director of the AGR Foundation, which is a nonprofit that provides critical services to the community to strengthen the human and animal bond. Valerie helped launch ARG, obtain IRS tax exempt status, and raise over $950,000 in funds for operations and capital campaign for a new campus in Marana. Valerie has extensive managerial and executive experience with nonprofit organizations. A few that you will undoubtedly recognize include the Beacon Group in Tucson, Tucson Audubon Society, and the American Red Cross in Butler County, Ohio. She has also served in government positions, including as the city manager of Wheat Ridge, Colorado. Valerie has a master's degree in management. With that, I will turn it over to Paula and Valerie, and they're going to begin by telling you how this session will be conducted. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. On behalf of both Valerie and myself, I want to say that we're delighted to spend this time with you. We knew that we had an hour and that it's going to go fast if it's typical. And what we want you to know is that we would like this to have more of a conversational tone to it. This is not, we're not going to present you with, 72 slides and we're not scripted. We will share some slides with you and some prepared information, but we really would like it to be conversational. And to help it be conversational, I hope you're all familiar with using the chat function in Zoom, so that if you do have a question or a comment, you want to put it in the chat. Kyle's going to be watching the chat. Probably Rebecca's going to watch the chat. I'm certainly going to watch the chat when Valerie's talking, and Valerie's going to watch for me while I'm talking. So you can use that because we don't all fit on one screen right now. We now have two different screens of participants. So we can't see you necessarily if you raise your hand. If you want to use that that reaction button, I think is the one where you can raise a hand, but I think using the chat is probably the best thing you can possibly do. We suggest that everybody stay muted. If you are just burning to get something answered and you don't think we're responding to it, and you want to unmute and say, I have a question or I have a comment, because this is going to be conversational, you can do that. But hopefully we'll be able to move through things, deal with questions as they come, but also allowing a little bit of time at the end. So we've really got some important thoughts to share with you. We know that a number of you have some questions in your own minds about, is a nonprofit organization the way that my neighborhood association should go? And I want to set a little context before we start. And I have a few questions that hopefully you all can help us get a handle on where you are at this moment. But there are more than $1.5 million, listen to me, million registered nonprofits in the United States today. And there are 28,000 of them just in Arizona. We have a huge number of nonprofits in our Southern Arizona region. And there are terms that people use to describe themselves. Some refer to themselves as public charities, as nonprofits, as tax-exempt entities. And yet those three kinds of terms have very specific definitions under federal and state law, and they're only somewhat synonymous. So for our purposes this evening, we're going to help you assess whether or not you are ready to start a nonprofit or not, a 501c3 nonprofit. And as we go along and we talk about this, please keep in mind, Valerie is not a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. We're not giving you legal advice about what to do, but we are going to share some of the insights and the perspective that we have gained since we have both been in the position of starting nonprofit organizations and getting the tax determination from the IRS, approving that status. There are times that we've looked at starting a nonprofit and decided it wasn't the thing to do. And we have certainly advised lots of people who have a dream of making a difference in the world, who have considered whether or not they should start a new organization. And sometimes they have gone ahead and done that. Sometimes they've done it when we've advised them not to. And so we've had lots of different kinds of experiences, and we want to share those with you. So I think to start out, if you could use the reaction button, does everybody see it at the bottom? It's like a little smiley face. Would you raise your hand or give us a smile or a heart or something if you actually have a 501c3 organization right now for your neighborhood association? Anybody have the 501c3 status already? Not seeing any raised hands or reactions. Okay, that's good to know. Because we thought if you did, it would be great to hear from you about what that experience was like. I'm curious about why you actually signed up for this tonight, or what you think you might gain if you were to have a nonprofit organization. So why don't you go ahead and put in the chat, why do you think you might want to become a nonprofit? What do you think it'll do for you, do for your neighborhood association? Love to see any comments in the chat about what that might look like for you. I'll give you a minute to do that. Eligible for grants.
Paula, I thought I saw Josephina raise her hand. I'm not quite sure. Was that correct?
Josephina, can you hear us? Can you unmute?
Josephina, can you unmute? There you go.
Yes, I did. We started test open for Buttercup Lane.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. We're having a hard time. Could you say that again?
You are a 501c3, Josefina? Okay, we're having some trouble with her audio.
We are, and sometimes when that happens, Josefina, people sign off. They leave the Zoom and then they come back and it's improved. If you want to try that, or if you want to just put in the chat what you were trying to say, we'll read it off to the group. Sorry that you're having that problem. While you're managing that, so we heard eligible for grants, having access to the grant funding, that it's helpful to encourage companies to donate to the things you're doing if you have the tax exempt status. Like to be able to offer donors an opportunity to write off on their taxes, their charitable contributions. We had one comment, don't know, curious about what the pros and cons are. Again, tax deductible donations. It seems easier to obtain grants. And that we had one comment about, I'm concerned that income hasn't been reported in the past years, and we might be liable for back taxes. And then a comment about associations with revenue less than 5,000 don't need to get a determination from the IRS, but organizations giving grants are more likely to do so if you have the IRS determination letter. Grants, again, currently a 501c4, which is a different kind of tax status. Quite often, that is the tax status that people go for when they want to influence partisan politics, and they want to get involved in those public policy questions and issues. And then we have a note about we're just starting up. So Valerie, have you hit this revenue less than $5,000 not needing to get the IRS determination?
So hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Really nice to see everybody. I appreciate it. I have not heard of that. I am always been under the understanding there's no and or. You're either a 501c3 or you are not. And the threshold is it's 50,000, whether you have to file a long 990 tax form or a short tax form. But I have not heard about less than 5,000. I just, in my mind, I don't think you're either a 501c3 or you're not. And the tax determination from the IRS is exactly that. There's two pieces to becoming a nonprofit. The first piece is obviously your organizational structure through the state, where you would then go to the corporate commission, file your name, and then you would then put your board together. You would have your articles of incorporation and your bylaws, and you become Arizona nonprofit. And then the second piece is the IRS tax determination piece. And that is then where you would get the 501c3 tax determination, where then you could then actually do some things like getting donations, searching for grants. What I'm seeing in the chat is interesting, because a lot of times when I talk to people, the first thing they say is, I want donations or I want grants. And that isn't really the reason why you form a 501c3 nonprofit. It's great to be able to have the ability to get donations, have people donate to you or go for grants. But a lot of the time when you're first starting up your 501c3 and you're moving forward, you're actually moving forward for a couple reasons. And can I share my screen?
That would be great.
Okay. Let's see if this will work. We will give it a whirl. Okay. And I just want to let everybody know too, I'm also the chapter chair for SCORE. So for Southern Arizona, and my specialty is nonprofits, and I help people start nonprofits. But let's see if this will work. Okay, so I just kind of want to look at this real quick, because this will help kind of talk about the grants and the donation piece. As a neighborhood association, you really have a great purpose, which is really to advocate for yourself, your neighbors, and work with the local government, improve your neighborhood, and form that structure that really helps you do that with the residents that you have. And that's a great way to do it. And it sounds like a lot of you, that's exactly where you are. It may be working, it may be not. It could be working for a lot of different reasons. It may not be working for some other reasons. But really, is it right for you to do that nonprofit? And really the time for you to form a nonprofit, talking about grants and talking about donations really doesn't drive that. What drives you forming that nonprofit is that vision and that mission. And it really, there's two things in my mind. We can talk about this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. When it's time for you to really look at forming a nonprofit, because now you're talking about a formal organization that has formal bylaws, formal articles of incorporation, formal structure, organizational. There's a lot of, there's not only a great thing that goes with it, but there's also some challenges that go with it. And there's also expenses that go with it. So, when your neighborhood really needs to change and your current resources are not sustaining the neighborhood or mission. And that is because then that's the point where you can actually formulate your mission and then try to decide how you're going to use this organization to maybe be able to create that formal structure to deal with the growth and move it from that volunteer group into something else. Now, you can have a nonprofit that has members in it and where they pay dues. That is perfectly acceptable. And so if you already have an association where people are paying dues to join, then you can also continue that. So when you talk about grants and donations, it really kind of formulates more around what type of income and resources are you going to bring in to be able to do what you want to do? And the nonprofit structure allows your resources or your income to be diverse. Does anybody have any questions about that? No? I can't really see the screen, so it's really hard for me because I've got my my PowerPoint up. So if there's something out there, please shout out. I just want to go back to the one about the $5,000. So when you do form your 501c3, let me ask you this. I can't see, but maybe you guys can tell me. Has anybody accepted donations already for your association?
I'll answer for us, and we just have dues, like $5 a year. We have not done donations, but there are some projects that we'd like to do in the neighborhood that would require grants or donations, because $5 a year is not going to do it.
Okay, so that kind of falls into where I'm talking about, where you really need your current resources are not sustaining the neighborhood mission. Is that right, Harold?
Yes.
Okay.
I see somebody put in the chat here that they already have significant income.
Yeah, Kevin, do you want to go ahead and speak up and answer Valerie's question?
Okay, there you go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, I missed a little bit of that. I'm not sure what the question was, but my concern is we have income, and we had previously been a 501c3, and an earlier treasurer had let that lapse. So now that we've had income and our status has lapsed, I'm concerned that we have some tax liability because we didn't pay taxes and we had income. So I'm trying to get that straightened out, first of all, and then also get 501c3 status so that hopefully we won't have to pay taxes on future income. Or until it's up, So
have you looked into the process for getting reinstated? And would you qualify under their rules for that? Because I do know a local nonprofit that, like you, didn't file the reports, lost their status. It took them about a year, but they got it back. Valerie, I don't know. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah. So absolutely. So after you lose that 501c3 status, you can immediately reapply for reinstatement, and you just need to go to the IRS website, find out what the stipulation is why it lapsed, and then just file for reinstatement. I don't know how you would pay taxes on money, because generally with a nonprofit, the money that comes in, whether it is through donations, grants, or like I do it, mine is fee for service. I actually charge people for my services, so I do fee for service. As long as your money is coming in and going back out and supporting your programs, then generally there isn't that, business tax that you have to pay for. So without, knowing how you were actually doing your accounting, that may not be an issue, but talking to an accountant would give you that answer. But how long has it been lapsed, Kevin?
Unfortunately, it lapsed in 2014. So it's my understanding that we have had too long of a lapse to simply reinstate.
And starting over is where you would probably need to be, and you would be starting over from a certain point. That would be a question I would really have that conversation with your accountant and or your attorney on whether or not anything that you've done in the past. Generally, when you go to apply for a nonprofit, we'll go over that a little bit. They really have you start from a starting point on. But because you had a 501c3, I think that's a really good question for your accountant and your attorney.
And I
Well,
think, go ahead.
We have retained an attorney just in the last few weeks, and that attorney's plan is to, go to the Corporation Commission and get us reincorporated, figure out if we owe any back taxes based on what our income and outgo was during that 9-year period, and then get the back taxes paid and then reinstate as a new 501c3. So that's the way we're approaching this now.
That makes the most sense.
Yeah.
I think that
Good.
makes sense. Yeah. And-
It's very unfortunate though, doggone it, because to keep that status alive would have been so much better. It's a shame.
Yeah, well, it's with a volunteer organization, you don't always have people who have a professional level of competency in all your roles. So sometimes somebody steps up and they want to help, but they don't know the ins and outs of what they need to do legally, so
Yeah, so
we're getting it caught up. So
yeah, so that's a kind of a segue into really what are the benefits and the challenges for something like this too. Because I think as a volunteer organization, many of you, the organization, the association may have been intact for a while or may have just started. But if you think about it, as a volunteer organization, if you don't have the right people in the right places, and volunteers tend to come and go, and policies and procedures that may not be followed, then sometimes forming a formal organization such as a nonprofit does make some sense if it is going to go ahead and forward that mission for you. And that's really important. That mission and vision is critical. What is it that your organization or your neighborhood really want to accomplish, especially if you have, I know some of you have parks in your association, in your neighborhood, some of you have roads, some of you have amenities, and who's really taking care of those, and how does that happen, and projects that you want to do. So the benefits really is to formalize your organizational structure to manage the association. And again, that really means that you have your formal organization through the state, and then you also go through your IRS recognized company to manage the day-to-day operations of the association. It does, again, a lot of you are looking for that, accepting tax deductible donations and grants. And then if you can, I know that we're able to do this, you can appeal to the Pima County if you own property to get tax exemption, property tax exemption on property owned by the company, by the organization. So for example, my nonprofit owns 5 acres of land in Pima County. And so we are exempt from property tax because we are a nonprofit. So we don't have to pay property tax on that land. Even developed, we don't have to pay property tax. So what you're doing is you're really forming that structure, that glue, that organization to be able to move forward. One of the things I do want to caution you on, and you talked about grants and donations, I keep coming back to that. It's important that you find other income that can come in. And so your dues or memberships fees could be potential income. Other income could be sponsorships from companies and things like that to be able to sponsor what's going on. You could actually hold events where people can come and donate and be part of the event. So when you start looking at forming your organization, what the IRS is going to want to see is your financials, now what you propose and what you propose out. So it's really trying to identify what it is you want to do with the organization, and then what's the revenue stream that you're going to get there. The challenge is that on the flip side, it's a formal organization. There's no one owner. The company is managed by the board of directors, and that you have additional expenses when you start forming your organization. And some of those expenses can be insurance, including errors and omissions insurance for your board of directors. You may need liability and property insurance. And if you decide to hire staff, you would need worker compensation insurance on top of that. If you decide to hire staff, you would have your staffing costs. And then you have your bookkeeping related to financials, filing your tax forms, and keeping up with your state forms that you have to file quarterly. And then also keeping your formal records and projects and outcomes. And then again, it's more administration. It could be less flexible than you have right now.
Rebecca has a point to make.
I'm sorry?
Rebecca has a point to make. She's going to unmute in a second, I think.
Valerie, I was just going to say, some of what you're saying is probably beyond a neighborhood association. Like, I don't know of any neighborhood associations that own land. That's a possibility, but probably not too likely. What I was, and then staff is probably a pretty, I've never seen it with a neighborhood association. It's possible, but they pretty much run on volunteers. I was going to ask about the insurance because most of the bylaws I've seen from neighborhood associations, and they are required to have bylaws to be registered with the city. And of course, neighborhood associations are not HOAs. We always have to say that. Most of them have a clause in their bylaws that say their board carries no liability, or there's no liability for their board.
I think people may try to say that, but when it comes down to it, if there is a possibility that you could be found liable for something, I don't know of any organization that chooses not to get directors and officers insurance, thinking that, oh, we said we're not going to be held liable, so we're going to be fine.
That's interesting. I'll bring it up with the city attorneys.
Yeah.
No, the people that want to sue you didn't agree to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference here. This is if you become a nonprofit.
Yes.
That's if you move from a volunteer association to a nonprofit. What we're talking about here, at least what I am, is what does that structure entail? And I understand you may not have staff, which is perfectly fine, but then you still are going to have some really good policies and procedures, especially for the most key positions, which is probably your bookkeeper at this point. But once you become a nonprofit, you kind of moves from that liquid volunteer type of association into more of a very structured company. And it's important that people understand that there could be some expenses that go with moving it from that association to more of a nonprofit organization.
Okay, and just before I put my hand down, I just noticed Josefina's comment. I don't know if others saw that. In Barrio Kroger Lane, there's a community land trust 501c3 that has to pay property taxes.
And because once you become a 501c3, I've actually had this question from a neighborhood association that was looking at it. They wanted to purchase the park. And because if they became a 501c3, they absolutely could, as long as their bylaws allowed for that type of purchase. So in other words, it could be it's a great benefit too, because then if there is something that a project that would entail owning land, then the organization, the 501c3, can absolutely do that.
So in that case, and Josefina said they have a 501c3 trust, and yet they're paying taxes. So is that something they could take up with Pima County?
Yeah, so you actually have to go to Pima County. There's a waiver that you fill out. The waiver actually goes before the supervisors, and the supervisors approve it based upon that it goes through this whole process and assessment. So and we also have vehicles, and those also we pay no taxes on the vehicles when we get our licenses as well, because we get that exemption from the county. So that is it's a benefit, but there is some work that you have to put into it.
Before we go much further and away from the grants piece that you were talking about earlier, Valerie, I think there are a lot of folks that think, oh, once we get this tax status, we'll apply for some grants and that money's just going to start flowing. It's going to be really easy. And I think, unfortunately, we all have a pretty rosy view of how easy it is and how much money there is out there for grants. And it's not that easy. And in Southern Arizona, our philanthropic community is not one of the largest, shall we say. There are a few foundations and corporate giving programs that do support the 501c3s as best they can, but it's not like ready-made. You just turn on the spigot and it starts to flow. And I wouldn't want anybody to think it's so easy. Why don't I just get going and then all my problems will be solved?
And it's the same with donations as well. And whether you take donations or grants, you need to have a process of being able to accept them and being able to track them, because donations can come in all different forms. It can come in as restricted money you can use for operations. Grants generally will require you to have some sort of ability to tell your story, and then also show how your organization not only will use the money, but be able to sustain your company, your business, so that the grant isn't the only supporting income that you're bringing in to do the project. So when you go for grants, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And it's also being able to have some sustainable ability to make sure that they're not the only people that are supporting your project.
We've had a request in the chat, mindful of time, that there's a concern that we might be moving too slowly and not getting to the important information people would need to know about if you decide to go forward with a 501c3 request for that status, what you have to do and where you go.
Sure. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's get into this of how to get started.
And there's a question: can SCORE help with getting tax exempt status or tax, getting nonprofit status?
Okay, so how that works is that you would actually request a mentor, and the mentors are free, and then they would actually help you walk through the process. For SCORE Southern Arizona, the only nonprofit mentor is me right now. So if you were to request that person, then it would be me, and then I would be helping you walk through this process from start to finish. And there's no cost to it. Does that help?
Thank you.
So this is kind of an abbreviated version of, I actually do several of these workshops, and when I work with people one-on-one, we get into this pretty deeper, but this is kind of more of a understanding of how it works. And so the first is that you would create your founding working board. You really only need one, but I always suggest 3 to 5 members. And I think all of you have a board, am I correct? So you can certainly use the board that you have, and then
They're willing.
if they're willing to
You
do it.
can't just assume it. Yes.
Well, that's true, but at least you have the understanding and you know how a board is put together. And so you can put together your board, and then you would go ahead and file your name with the Arizona Corporate Commission, and you would select an Arizona nonprofit, and those are your founding board members that would put that together and go ahead and do that. You generally will hold your first board meeting. And then I always suggest that you get an attorney that would help you then write your articles of incorporation and your bylaws. And the reason why you want your board there first is because your board has to approve all of this before it gets filed with the Secretary of State. And so the board is very important. The founding board is very important to help with actually putting together the bylaws that you probably already have, your articles of incorporation, and making sure that your bylaws are going to fit, the mission that you want to do, and give you the flexibility in your organization of how your board members are selected. Are you a membership organization? All those things go into these documents that are filed then with the Secretary of State. You probably already have a bank account, but then generally if you're new, we ask you to open up a bank account. But once your articles of incorporation and bylaws are filed, you generally want to make sure your bank account has the correct name on it, and that as a nonprofit organization.
We had a comment in the chat about having a difficulty getting that bank account
Sure.
because of not having the board. And so, but they had officers. And so I think my question was, why aren't the officers board members? And then you don't have that problem. So
and I will tell you, almost every bank in Tucson requires the entire board to walk through the doors of that bank. A resolution, because the board has to pass a resolution to open up the bank account, and the board members have to be there as signers. It's an interesting concept, but you really need to do the steps that we just had on the slide first, so that you can then make sure that you're able to walk through the door with your board resolution, your articles of incorporation, and your Secretary of State's in good standing, and then open up the bank account. From there, you really kind of want to put together what your business plan is, and it can be as simple as 1 page, but you really kind of want to understand where you're heading and where your 3 to 5 year financial projections will be. And again, this is where you would also secure your insurance for your organization. And you're still in that governing board mode, even though you've been together for a long time or you've had your association, you really are forming a new structure. So it's getting to understand what that means, and it really guides you as you go out through to fill out your IRS, your 1023 application. Has anybody looked at the 1023 application?
Yes.
Did you run out of the room screaming?
No, it's not terrible.
Okay.
I think there's a 1023 EZ also.
There is, especially if you think you're going to be under that $50,000 threshold for income. You certainly can take a look at that and do the EZ application. I will caution you, some people who have done the EZ application, the government has actually then put them back into a private foundation, as opposed to keeping them as they're still a charity 501c3, but they're designated as a foundation. So you just want to make sure you're always checking the right information on that EZ form, because sometimes it can get a little complicated and people have checked the wrong thing, and then they have to go back and redo what they've said.
And what is the EZ maximum amount you can be projecting in that 4 years? that you have to give them budgets for? Is it $50,000?
I
If
think
you're
so.
over that, you can't do the easy form. Is that right?
I think you still can do the easy form, but they may come back and ask for more information.
Okay. Because I have heard from people who tried to do easy and they were sent back and said, do the full application.
Yeah, I don't ever recommend you do the easy form. I recommend you do the longer form, and the reason why is I've had many people come back doing the easy form and the government checked them as a private foundation instead. And then they had to go back and file the long form. And then from here, it's really kind of, you know, finishing this up. I just checked with the government. They are at about 8 to 10 months to get your status. You can still take donations. You can take donations the day you file this with the government. So in other words, the day you file it is the day they will backdate your tax exempt status. If you do take donations, my recommendation is you keep them in a separate bank account and do not touch them until your status has been approved. But if you are working on a project, you can raise seed money if you need to. So because the government will backdate it to the date that you actually file your application. And then, go ahead.
And you don't issue the receipt for a tax deductible donation until that time.
Correct.
Okay.
And then again, you would be setting up your bank account. Now, this is interesting. So you probably have a whole set of accounting files and how you do accounting. Nonprofit accounting is very, very different. It is not the same as cash in, cash out. Most people do accrual. It is very different types of accounting, different types of chart of accounts, different ways of setting up budgets. And then if you do need to collect a large sum of money before you get your IRS tax designation, we could always talk about what a fiduciary might be able to do to assist you. But when you start doing your financial plan, it really is important that you understand the chart of accounts because it is very different than the type of association profit and loss and balance statement that you have now. So whoever you're using for bookkeeping, hopefully they have some good nonprofit background. Generally, I recommend QuickBooks nonprofit version because that will help with budgets, and it actually helps you put together your projections for the IRS form as well. The other thing that you might want to do, I recommend that you do some job descriptions for all of your volunteer people. And then you have your policies and procedures and handbooks as well.
And that includes a job description for what it means to serve on the board and the various officer slots too.
Exactly. And I have a really great, it's called a board gap matrix. So you can take the people that you have on your board now, you can put them into this matrix, see where your gaps are, and then look for new board members to fit in. And as you're starting to interview new board members, as people leave, you can use this matrix too. So you're always looking for people to bring to the board that either can bring, you know, the heavy lifting piece, can bring money or find money, or can be people that can bring in skills that the board doesn't have and the organization doesn't have. So your board is very important. And starting off, we really call it, as I said back here, your founding members board. And you can see once you get to kind of into the business plan and moving forward, you really are getting more into the founding and the governing of the organization. And then lastly, to strengthen your alliances and collaborations to support your programs, you know, really working on those partnerships, sharing or supporting programs with other nonprofits because other nonprofits love to work with other nonprofits, and then exploring those alliances and opportunities as well. So that's just a real snapshot of what that looks like, of how to get started. What questions do you have for me?
Okay, I'll throw in a question. In another nonprofit where I'm the treasurer, the income is less than 50,000 a year, so we do a 990 EZ.
Yeah.
That one is actually in California, and we have to file a balance sheet and income statement with the state. Is there a thing like that in Arizona, or just the officers and board of directors?
No, you don't have to do any of that in Arizona. California has a lot of different laws that are very different. In Arizona, you do not, but you need to have your profit and loss statements at each board meeting, and they need to be approved by your board. You need to have them. You may get a grant, Harold, that will ask you to provide those, and you may get grants that actually want to audit your financials or may ask for an audited statement. So you do not have to do that here as you do in California.
Yeah,
Okay,
let
also-
me, I'm sorry, go ahead, and then I have a question for the group.
Okay, one thing is that the city is requiring basically bylaws for a neighborhood association. And I think that a typical tax exempt organization has separate articles of association or incorporation and bylaws. So should our bylaws be split out like that?
So you do, your attorney will actually draft articles of incorporation, and then you will have bylaws. Now, without being able to see your association bylaws, you may be able to use some of that to develop your bylaws for your organization. But you will have to have both documents filed with the Secretary of State when you put together your company as a nonprofit.
So here's my question for you all. If you could have many of the advantages of a 501c3 without having to form and go through all of these steps that Valerie has walked us through to form a new charitable organization, would you consider doing it another way? And if the answer is yes, quite often what people do is they find an organization that does have that charitable status, 501c3 status, or they're exempted because they're a church, and they agree to become the fiscal sponsor of the project that you have in mind, or the association. And you have a written agreement with them where they serve as your fiscal sponsor. Quite often you pay some percentage fee to them for letting you come under their umbrella for the tax deductible gifts, for the grants, and all of that. And there are certainly a number of organizations that when they are not so sure that the charitable programs they have in mind are really going to take off, and they want to buy some time to incubate a new idea, an exciting idea perhaps, and to try things out without going through all of the steps of becoming a 501c3, that fiscal status works well. The other thing people do is that they team up with another organization that has the tax status. And let's say if you had a couple of the neighborhood associations in Tucson that have a 501c3 status, and they would be willing to form an alliance with you, maybe to do a project together, that you could use their tax status in order to get the work done that you want to do. And I do know of at least one community in the United States where a bunch of neighborhood associations said, why are we going to form 42 different nonprofits? Let's form one. We'll form a board that'll have representation from several of our groups, and that will be the umbrella that will receive gifts, grants for us. We'll manage the money, we'll do the reporting, and we'll all, contribute some small amount of money to that one corporation that they set up. That could be a highly efficient and effective way to do it. So
Yeah,
there are some alternatives.
The organization I'm still treasurer for in California has is part of a group that has a group exemption from the IRS.
Mhm.
And so they have, instead of the IRS, evaluated the articles of association and so on. And then said, yeah, we think you're okay. And so we qualified under their group exemption.
Yeah. So some of you may be familiar with an organization in Tucson called Iskashita, which works with immigrants, and they glean the fruits and off of the fruit trees and in neighborhoods across our community where people just want to be rid of the fruit and they want that fruit to go to food banks. That organization has been in existence for several years and just got their tax 501c3 status last year because they had a fiscal sponsor for all those years up till then. Rebecca, I think you have a point to make or a question.
I just wanted, I know we're running out of time, and, you know, first, thank you. I know there's a lot of information that's been presented. I'm sure people are going to have questions after this, which you can go ahead and send us and we'll work to get those answers. I think the idea of some kind of alliance is a really interesting one. And if there were enough people here who were interested in exploring that a little further, we could help arrange a meeting along that lines. What I did want to ask is, can you provide any kind of estimate on the expense of going through the process? I know Valerie said something about conferring with a lawyer at one point. Are there pro bono lawyers? I mean, for the most part, these neighborhood associations are not entities that, you know, have a wealth of resources.
Rolling in the dough, huh?
Yeah.
Valerie, what have you found in this area the cost to be for this?
So I have found in this area that you can interview a lot of attorneys, and you should. Most of them will do some pro bono work right up front for doing the articles of incorporation and bylaws, and then put you on retainer to help with other things. But accountants do not do that. Accountants will never do that. So if you have a good volunteer bookkeeper, then you should use that. Otherwise, you can expect to pay $150, $200 an hour for an accountant as well as an attorney. So to start up, if you were to do something like this, you would probably need about $3,000 to $5,000 for that. But I am telling you, there really are quite a few attorneys out there, especially if you decide to do some sort of alliance work, that would really want to help you. The reason why the attorney works so well is because they have these templates very quickly, and they can formulate them very, very fast to your mission and what you're doing. So I would say I would use, you know, 1,500 to maybe 3,000 to be able to start up if you had to use all paid professionals.
Yeah,
And does that include filing fees? Are there filing fees?
Yes, that does.
Okay, okay.
They're
IRS
minimal, aren't they, in comparison?
I'm sorry?
Aren't they minimal in comparison to the cost of the accountant or the lawyer if you
Yeah.
have to spend that?
I don't remember what the IRS,
Okay.
fee, I think it's $500-600. I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
There is a nonprofit law firm that is in Tucson, a sole proprietor, someone who just wants to do good things for good people. So you might search out someone like that. Some of the bigger firms can do the pro bono, but a lot of times the small firms, you know, their hearts may be there and they want to help you. Maybe they live in your neighborhood and that'll get you some help. But you know, just it's hard, particularly if it's work on their end that you're not going to be in a position to really have a retainer later, probably. And so they may be cautious about how many of these they can do. So if you ever if you want a referral from me from that one nonprofit attorney, you can I think our contact information is in the slide set, which is going to be shared with you. You could contact me and I could share it. I don't feel very comfortable announcing the name of the lawyer and all that in this entire group. And it's really just a referral because I know of the existence of this person and this intention. So I think, you know, I know we're almost out of time. I just want to like run through very quickly, like there are like 7 questions that you need to ask yourself. Are you ready to maybe move forward to do the 501c3 on your own? You know, will you serve a charitable class? So are the group of people that are going to receive assistance from you, or the programming that you do, are they, you know, kind of an eligible thing? And is it a charitable program? Are you going to do something other than we just want to raise money and then spend the money? So that would be the second thing. The third is, can you comply with all those record keeping and reporting requirements so you can maintain your tax status? The fourth is, can you come up with the dollars you need to fund the startup? Whether it's $4,000 or $5,000 or whatever to get you through to get your exempt status. 5 is, do you have an anticipated budget? Because you can't go forward unless you can pass a public support test down the line about where your income is coming from, and you can project 4 years of budgets for the IRS. 6 is, do you have a longer term funding plan? You know, Valerie said it, the key is sustainability. And you've got to be able to generate revenue in one way or another, either through the services that you provide, your dues, your membership fees, and those occasional wonderful grants or kind of grassroots grants that might come your way. And last is, you know, do you have people who have agreed to serve on your board, who know what that means, accept that role and all that responsibility? So if of those 7 questions, if you've got 4 yeses, then maybe it's a good sign that you could go down this road. If you have fewer than 4 yeses to these 7 questions, I think you really need to pause and think and reconsider this for a while longer.
That's really, really helpful. Is that included? Are those 7 questions included in your?
They're not in the slide set, but I could type them out for you.
Yeah, that would be fabulous. And I think because we are at 6:30, we probably should wrap up. But this is a lot of information, very, very helpful for all those people who have been kind of wondering what this is, how do you do it? We will be posting this and the recording on the Neighborhood Resources link. We'll send the link out to everybody who registered, all of those who are here tonight and anybody else who registered. And if you have questions or there's something you didn't understand, please go ahead and forward it to me, and we will touch base and see if Paula and Valerie would be willing to give us just a little bit more information to answer your questions. So thank you, Paula. Thank you, Valerie. Thank all of you for spending an hour tonight. And I hope you dream about 501c3. So, have a good evening.
Good night, everybody.
And everybody, thank you.
Thank you very much.